Sun, Noah Hoffman, and for Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. A very good morning to you both. Thanks for interrupting your bank holidays and joining us. We've got a kind of clear focus on the front pages today. And Noah, we're going to start with the Times take on the benefit story.
Yes, so we have lots of speculation and briefings swirling Westminster at the moment about how Keir Starmer can quash this growing rebellion within his own backbenchers against disability benefit cuts and also winter fuel payments as well. And now we have the Times reporting that as some sort of concession to these backbench MPs who are very concerned by disability benefit cuts and the impact it's having on the doorstep, ministers may delay its implementation and give recipients who are facing cuts more time to sort of figure out how they're going to manage the transition. Whether that concession in and of itself will be enough is unlikely. The anger growing in the PLP, in the Parliamentary Labour Party, is becoming more palpable, nowhere near the levels of sort of end of days Boris Johnson and Liz Truss yet. But there is a lot of frustration in the views of these MPs that Keir Starmer is sort of moving away from the Labour values that he purported to have when he was running to be leader of the party.
And Ava, there's a lot of frustration, I guess, which was the main part of the story for a number of weeks. Maybe now the story's turning as well to also be that they're feeling powerful, the backbench MPs. They're feeling like they can secure some kind of concessions.
I think it's a little bit mixed. I think toward the beginning of last week, I think many backbenchers were imagining they were going to have to form some kind of rebellion, and they were looking at a vote in early June. Now the conversation is actually this legislation is going to move slightly and it's going to be a lot softer. And so now many backbenchers aren't willing to put their name out in public because they're not sure what they're actually signing themselves up to. They think that it's changing and it's softening. But everything sort of got thrown into turmoil by Gordon Brown reappearing at the beginning of, middle of last week, when he was out about talking about the two-child benefit cap and how that should be lifted. And that is sort of, that's among a swathe of measures that Brown is pushing for behind the scenes. And I think a number of backbenchers are now a bit more comfortable because they think that everything's going to be a little bit softer.
Well worth, by the way, watching his interview with Sophie Ridge last week. It's on the Sky News website. It was the first of the comments that led to some of this pressure building. Ava, bring us on to the next story. It's a similar topic, obviously, but the Telegraph's take. Starmer's benefits U-turn will blow $5 billion hole in the budget. We still don't know the shape of the U-turn, but this is sort of weighing up how much it could cost.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite a U-turn because I suppose you could argue that Keir Starmer was always going to push for lifting the two-child benefit cap. It was only in the last year or so that he actually... he didn't lift it, and, most people thought that he would. The Telegraph are complaining that this is going to cost the Treasury or the Exchequer £3.5 billion, but it does fail to mention that actually if you lift 700,000 children out of deep poverty, then that could save the state around £40 billion. So arguably, there is actually a saving to be made if the state is going to make an intervention.
Is there, no, though, an argument on this of, again, breaking a past pledge?
On the two-child benefit gap. So I think Keir Starmer always had the intention of ending the cap. In terms of the pledge around the budget, I mean, would this be the first broken promise from this government? I mean, I've completely lost count in terms of if you're talking about the fiscal rules. I think the two-child benefit cap may take a bit longer than we think. I mean, the government at the moment doesn't even know how it's going to fund raising the threshold of winter fuel payments. And then Keir Starmer, we can't forget, made this promise that I think he personally may be very much regretting at the general election, that he's not going to raise income tax, he's not going to raise VAT. And already with the taxes that have been risen in order to fund the state and to fund public services, there's been a huge backlash, particularly around, tax-raising initiatives such as the national insurance rise on businesses. So how he's going to pay for this will be an interesting question.
Let's bring in your next story first, Noah, on the Daily Express. Labour's fuel U-turn in total chaos, and then we can kind of talk about what may or may not have to happen in the autumn statement.
Yes, so we saw at PMQs last Wednesday that After weeks of speculation and, very important to mention, categorical denial from the Prime Minister's spokesperson, we finally received the admission from Keir Starmer himself that there will be a change to winter fuel payments. This is an issue that everyone has been complaining about, all MPs, but particularly Labour MPs, on the doorstep as a key issue of anger among constituents, and also a key driver of voters to reform as well, which we saw during local council elections and the by-election as well. Now, the policy and the big U-turn clearly hasn't been very well thought through, because when pressed on it, the team around the Prime Minister can't even give a date. They can't let us know whether the threshold will be risen in time for this coming winter, and again, how it's going to be funded as well. And so the messaging around what should be sort of a weight off the shoulders of many MPs has really struggled to land. And also, there are concerns that the damage has already been done. And doing a U-turn on such a sort of flagship policy this early into a premiership is also quite embarrassing as well.
Ava, it's also really interesting looking at all the reporting that came out over the back part of last week, and Sam Coates was doing some of this about who drove this U-turn or change of mindset on the winter fuel payment. And it sounds like it was Rachel Reeves, Pat McFadden and Keir Starmer all together in quite a united fashion.
Keir Starmer, I believe, was blindsided by the winter fuel payments. This was sort of an idea that was swirling by an aide that had allegedly convinced Starmer into cutting back on the winter fuel. And I think a number of ministers were actually rather frustrated that they had to then convince their constituents this was a fair thing to do when it's not. Arguably, I wouldn't say it was typical Labour policy. You've also got people like Torsten Bell, who now sit in the Treasury, and, you know, him being from the Resolution Foundation. It was rather embarrassing last week when this almost semi-white paper came out that revealed how many pensioners and children have been plunged into poverty by various policies that have been introduced over the last 6 months. So that wasn't received very well. But, I mean, like Noah was saying, this is also very interesting in light of reform, because we are expecting to have this speech from Nigel Farage tomorrow that was rather widely trailed, actually, in the Sunday papers, and he is looking to potentially exploit this vacuum that has been left by Labour on winter fuel and the two-child benefit cap, and it looks like he's going to pledge to, lift the cap and reinstate the winter fuel payment, which would be rather extraordinary if we've got, you know, as we're moving on to later in the year.
Do you think that that's going to, Ava, add pressure on the Chancellor to not be outflanked, and with it, of course, the cost that would come with that as we approach the autumn statement?
Well, Labour are panicking at the moment by, with reform, and I think they're sort of chasing them. Well, they're chasing them definitely in the polls, but they're also chasing them on issues like immigration, and they're sort of, Labour are taking or adopting policies that don't really naturally fit them. I don't really see that this is at... I don't really know what they're going to do with this, because it would be silly if they chase them and lift the benefit cap just because Nigel Farage has decided to pledge it, because realistically, if he is going to get into government in 4 years' time, I doubt this is going to be a pledge that he'll keep to.
It's really fascinating stuff, the moving parts on that. We should move on from this this linked set of stories we've started on. And next story... Oh, no, sorry, Ava, you've got the next story. Donald Trump on the front page of the Telegraph.
Yes, so this is the story about Lucy Connolly, who was the wife of a Tory councillor who, following the Southport stabbings, she had put up a tweet. It was a tweet that was up for around 4 hours, in which she sort of... Well, the argument that was made during the sentencing was that she incited violence by encouraging people... Well, not encouraging, sorry, that's terrible wording. It was argued that she encouraged people to set fire to asylum hotels. This has sort of ignited a free speech debate that now apparently the White House are interested in, which tallies with something that was said by the Vice President J.D. Vance not so long ago about an issue around a blasphemy law or free speech that we've sort of de facto introduced in the UK. And now Trump is allegedly monitoring the situation. There are many calls for her to be released. She's got this 31-month sentence, which does seem rather extraordinary for the tweet.
It's a really interesting one, no, because clearly almost all of the opposition are weighing in on this. Rupert Lowe has been very loud on it, so has Nigel Farage. The Tories have started to pick up on it. It's a difficult one for the Prime Minister, because whatever his career past, but particularly given his legal background, it isn't the Prime Minister's position to comment on the justice system and lengths of sentences. And it opens a whole can of worms if he starts to get involved on it. Yet the pressure is building.
The pressure is building, and I do think justice is actually a very political issue. I mean, we just had a whole major row about sentencing guidelines and accusations of a two-tier system, and we saw that government had to completely get involved and effectively pressure the sentencing council to change their guidelines because politically they weren't landing. I think with this issue of Lucy Connolly, look, no one's going to argue that her tweet was anything other than quite revolting. But the fact that she is sitting in a prison while someone like a convicted paedophile like Hugh Edwards is really not going to sit well with the public at all. And I think a lot of this is about double standards. There are so many cases we can point to where people have avoided lengthy prison sentences or prison at all over issues that are arguably even more grotesque. So I don't think this issue is going to go away. And at some point, perhaps Downing Street will have to weigh in on it more. At the moment, Keir Starmer is exactly sort of using that line that it's not his place to comment. But when we see that issues of justice, issues of sentencing are so political, that pressure is going to eventually lead to him having to take a more stringent stand one way or another. And the White House involvement will only add to that pressure as well.
Noah and Ava, thank you so much for this hour. We'll see you again next hour. We'll be back after this short break with all of the day's top stories.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered.